All right, last day talking about carburetors. You ain't got it by now. You need a better teacher. Okay, so we're going to put together some of the stuff we learned here, but first we'll talk about, we'll put it all together, kind of carb as in carburetor. Let's talk about some of the disadvantages of carburetors. Anybody want to throw out some stuff for me?
Can't go inverted.
He read my notes. They don't work upside down.
What was negative 3?
Or negative. Or negative G's. Good point. Well, hopefully you understand. Why not? What's that?
Fuel level on the float.
The fuel level on the float goes the wrong way. So if you think about both the Marvel and the Stromberg, where is the main metering jet, or where is the inlet going into the carburetor?
On the bottom.
Yeah, on the bottom in normal situations. So when you go upside down, it's just not going to go not going to run up too well.
So how does race planes get their fuel through carburetor?
Race planes or aerobatic planes?
Aerobatic planes, sorry.
Not with a carburetor.
Okay.
Or they just are aware that they're going to lose engine power. It's just part of it. They made a Cessna 150 Aerobat. Anybody familiar with that plane? I think it just had a carburetor on it. It just had some higher stress loading wings. And there was a lady who used to do an incredible show with this. Reed Hillview Airport. It's named after her. Amelia Reed. I think her name was Amelia Reed. And she would do this incredible aerobatic performance in a 150. And you'd go inverted and you'd hear the engine quit. She'd do her thing and come back around and hear it take off again. So, hey, it's a carburetor. Who was the lady was it Patty something or another with the Beechcraft? Wagstaff, yeah, okay. She's still doing her thing?
I think she retired.
All right, retired. Okay.
Inefficient mixing of fuel?
What?
Inefficient mixing of fuel?
Inefficient mixing of fuel. I think you got ahead of me. Maybe I didn't put that one. But you're right. Inefficient. It's not very efficient at mixing fuel. I started to write this. We'll go with this one's slow throttle response. Of course, I got these out of a book. How can I fix this slow throttle response idea? Accelerator pump. There you go. Forms ice easily. I'm always surprised at when you guys are running the ground power unit, and I always grab onto the little, touch it. Did you guys touch that? And everybody kind of touches the intake manifold like, oh, it's going to be hot. And Kevin touched it, and, he didn't get burned. I'm going to brave it. And they're like, well, that thing's ice cold. I'm like, yeah, it's really cold. So, it's super cold. Right? All right, so ice. Why does ice form easily, or why is this happening?
Inventory effect. Low.
Okay.
Low pressure.
It's rubbing heat from the metal parts.
Yep, because we need heat to evaporation, and so we have that going on. We talk about the throttle. We have a decrease in pressure. So ice can form even in hot weather. And we said as fuel vaporizes, the temp drops. The air temp drops. Then, of course, when it drops below 32 degrees, you're going to get ice inside the carburetor. I like this little fact here. Ice can happen when OAT. What's OAT stand for? Outside air temperature. It's an actual thing you need to know. Outside temperature, when outside air temperature is, care to guess?
70 degrees.
I've heard it's up to 100.
32 to 100 is what I have in my notes, depending on the humidity. Well, how come we're not going to get a carb ice below 32? That sounds really silly.
Freezing point of water, it'll already be frozen.
What's that?
Freezing point of water, it'll already be frozen.
It's already frozen. So now you're just ingesting snow. All right, so it's already frozen. So let's see. If ice gets bad enough, the ice can block the throttle. Can block the throttle from movement. It can start choking off the air passages, so ice can block the throttle and we'll say kill the engine. And what book was that you had, Juan, that was so interesting?
Oh, yeah. Mountain flying.
What was that? And so Juan showed me a paragraph in this book he's going to show us. And it actually said, if the ice gets bad enough in the carburetor, lean it out until they get a backfire, and it can blow the ice out of the carburetor.
What? Wow.
So what's the name of that book?
Mountain flying.
Mountain Flying. And so you think, oh man, how hard must that be? Well, you can see with the ground power unit, make it backfire anytime I want to with the Strombergs. I just pull it into lean and just add throttle until it backfires. It does every time. So it's, it's got that long pipe on it. But yeah, go ahead and read it out loud. I'll do it if you want.
If the ice in the carburetor is built up to the point where there is a serious loss of power, it is sometimes possible, in an emergency, to free the passageway by leaning out the mixture until the engine backfires and dislodges some ice.
It's actually something I would have never thought about, but we'll know. All right. So what can we do to get rid of ice? So,
Lean it out till it backfires.
lean it out till it backfires. I don't have that in my notes. And you'll get more into the different types of ice, where the ice is forming, refrigeration ice, rime ice, everything else when you get into ice and rain stuff. So, well, I've got right here 2 types of ice. 2 types of ice. Carburetor speaking. Impact ice. So impact ice in a carburetor, it's just what it sounds like. You are actually running into ice that is already formed in the atmosphere. And where's this ice going to stick to? The what? Air cleaner. So it'll start to fill up the air cleaner. So if the air, that's the first thing the air comes in. So the impact ice, is we have ice around us, we're flying into it. It's impacting the air cleaner, which is right out in the airstream, right behind the propeller. And it starts impacting that. And it covers that up. How can you get rid of that ice?
Yeah, open door.
Not at all. You switch your air supply.
You're not getting rid of it. It's stuck there. There's nothing you can do to get rid of it. Now, your plane's a little different because you have alternate air doors, which is for fuel injection. We'll talk about that when we get into fuel injection. But for a carburetor, we've only got carb heat, right? And so carb heat it's almost the same. It's the exact same system that's heating the cabin. You're taking air from around the exhaust system, not the dirty air, but clean air that's just going next to the exhaust pipe and warming up that air. And you have a little valve that's going to open up and allow the hot air to bypass the air filter, come back around and go up into the carburetor. So now we're going to be using hot air for that. So we have impact, and that will not do anything for impact air because it's impact air is up front and the carb heat's in the back. But we have throttle. We'll call it throttle ice. And that's the ice that's forming inside of the carburetor. So how can we get rid of that?
Carb.
All right. There is such thing as de-ice and anti-ice. So de-ice is remove formed ice. That means it's something that if you have ice, you can turn this on and get rid of it. So, de-ice. Well, how can we get de-ice? We can add carburetor heat. Let's go to something here. Oh, I was hoping this picture right here would show an actual carburetor heat, but it's on the other side. But you can see a little bit. Let me see. Here's the exhaust pipe, and it's running through this chamber right here. And so all of the air that's surrounding this chamber is going to be pretty hot air. And it looks like, because right here is some sort of hinge, so the normal cool air is going to come through here and up into the carburetor. So that's normal cool air. And it looks like with this particular aircraft, what's happening is that this door would be, I don't know, somehow, somewhere or another. The door usually goes this way or that way, but I think there's a door right here that's going to block this off and allow air to get sucked in through here and down this way and around. So two things to note. One, the air filter's on the outside of the engine. This is on the inside of the engine. So it's protected from ice and rain and everything else. So when the carb heat is turned on, it's going to draw air from around here, which is being heated up from this pipe, draw it in, and we have hot air coming in. What's hot air going to do for me?
Lower power. Melting the ice.
Okay, it's going to do what?
Lower power output.
Okay, lower power output. What's the good thing it's going to do?
No ice.
Melt the ice or prevent it from happening. So if you do have ice, then we're going to use it as a de-ice system and melt that ice. But remember that you are losing power with that. Why am I losing power?
Because the air is less dense.
So air is less dense. So if I lean it out, will I get my power back?
No.
No, I just have less dense air. It's like you went up in altitude. So that's just one of the trade-offs. Add carburetor heat. Now this is kind of an interesting thing. So let's just say we have carb ice flying along. And the way you're going to notice carb ice if you have a fixed pitch propeller is you're going to start losing RPM. Why am I going to lose RPM?
Losing power.
Less air is going through the carburetor. I'm starting to choke it off. Venturi's getting smaller, or the air passage is getting smaller because it's forming on the actual throttle plate. It could get so bad it could actually stop the throttle plate from moving. So air's getting choked off. You're going to start seeing the RPM start to come down, come down, come down. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm flying along doing that. I'm going to add carburetor heat. So there's a little knob in the cockpit, and I pull it out, carb heat on, and it flaps the door, and I went from nice cold air to hot air. So the engine just
Drops even more.
lost power. Okay? Now, if it works, it's going to start melting the ice. And so I'm going to get what into the engine? Water and ice into the engine. How's the engine going to like that? It's going to run worse. So what do? Don't turn that off. That made it worse. Right? No. Got to leave it on. Got to. So you're going to pull it on. Engine's going to get worse. Ice is going to melt, get a little worse. And then it's going to suddenly get better. Hey, look, it fixed itself. And then I push the carb heat in. What's it going to do? Get a little bit better. And everybody's happy. All right. So let's see, add carburetor heat. So engine will run rough from the ice buildup. If we turn on carb heat, and what's going to happen? What's going to happen to my mixture?
I mean,
Going to run rich. Very good. So turn on carb heat will cause a loss of power. Well, one, because it will run rich. And two, I want to say we have hot air. So hot air is, what's that? Less dense. I wanted to say higher density altitude, but I don't want to confuse anybody. So hot air is less dense. So you got two things going on there. You're going to run rich, run less dense. Almost the same thing. Let's see. So carb heat adds about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is a loss of about 10%. As the ice breaks off, / melts, engine runs worse. Ain't nobody happy now, right? When ice is gone, engine runs better. And then when carb heat is off, engine runs normally. Until ice builds up again. So maybe you want to fly around with the carb heat on. If you get nice, I probably
I
would.
was just thinking,
I would.
one of the PUHs say that, but if you're kind of in, I don't know, in a situation where it constantly builds up and loses, I guess you could run half
I read it-
carburetor heat, and then you might find just the perfect mix where you're not losing that much power, but you're still not building up ice.
Yeah, you might. I read a book that suggested that. And it also suggested that, in fact, this book, but I won't write this down in case I got it wrong. I have to reread it. But it also talked about using carburetor heat as a way of, it helped create a better evaporation of the fuel, which helped even the distribution between the cylinders. So I think that it was talking about pulling just enough carb heat on to get a better mixture. Well, it's kind of crazy, yeah. All right, so that was de-ice. This is anti-ice. And that is prevent ice. Let me tell you, it's one thing if you're flying around at 5,000 feet and better, and your engine starts running a little bit rough, and you're thinking, all right, that's okay. I'm way up here in the air, which is way up for me, and just pull the carb heat on, and I'm okay. It's a whole nother issue when you're getting ready to land, and got your carburetor pulled back to idle, and you go to give it some throttle, and realize that there's no engine left, and you're just a little bit short of the runway. That's not a fun place to be, I would imagine. I don't ever want to be there. I remember I was flying. I learned to fly off a little grass strip, 1,800 feet at best, and it was and obstacles at both ends. One end had a giant oak tree with power wires, and the other end had a bushes that were bigger than this room. So you learn to kind of manage yourself going in and out, and there was no good place to land off. So it was always stressed to me that, well, first of all, the unforgivable sin, and it was to run out of fuel. So don't ever do that. And second, it was don't leave yourself short of the runway. Always make sure that when you're coming in, that you are not going to, don't do something stupid. Don't drag it in on the engine. In case the engine quits, you're going down. You should always be in a spot where you can make the runway, and then plan accordingly. So when I started flying out this runway out here, it's freaky long to me. and so I was flying with somebody that said, well, hit the numbers. Why would I do that? I've got 12,000, 10,000 feet.
10,000.
Yeah, it's 2 miles. Why would I hit the numbers? We're at the other end of the runway. I actually come over the numbers sometimes at 1,000 feet still. And I start my descent a minute after that. Well, my plane's slow. It's like, I'm landing at the other end of the runway. Why would I hit the numbers and spend all day taxiing? So, I don't know. I guess so anyway, that's just the way I learned. It's kind of weird. So, ice is most likely to form at partial throttle. And when am I most likely to be at partial throttle? Less partial throttle. Descent and airport operations. So you come into an airport and you're in the pattern. So like here, if you stay in the pattern, you take off, you're full throttle, and you get a couple hundred feet up, 500-600 feet up in the air, pull back the throttle a little bit, continue to climb till you're about 1,000 feet. Now you're 1,000 feet. Now this is my airplane. He's already landing. So, you know, make my turn. Now I could get 2 miles. I got to fly this way at least. So, you know, I'm at cruise throttle until I get even with the numbers. And then I'm going to reduce power and start my descent and come around in. So where am I at partial throttle? That descent part. Descent coming around to landing. So when am I going to get ice? When I start dropping down. When do I not want to have ice? Right there. So the first thing you do, it's 100 degrees out. Carb heat. Reduce power.
The red knob,
Not the red one. It'll quit definitely at the red one. What else will it do if I pull the red one?
idle cut off.
Well, I should see a little rise in the fall, right? Only at idle. Okay. So most likely to form there. So so that is why we turn on carb heat during landing as a precaution, pretty much no matter what. What is the problem with carb heat?
You lose power?
You lose power. Good. So we talked about losing power. But I'm okay because I'm descending.
It's unfiltered.
There's my thing. Unfiltered. I'm going to write that. What else could I be concerned with?
Carbon. Carbon monoxide.
Actually, it's going into the carburetor. So as long as everything's working, we're okay. But yes, if the exhaust is broken, then I can get carbon monoxide. The engine gets sleepy. All right, so we've got
We're wasting fuel.
wasting fuel. Are we?
Why, if you want to cruise with a hard car heat on?
Oh yeah. Why would you do that?
That dude's
What's that?
running really rich at a lower
So you
Um,
value your plugs maybe?
No. What's the air doing?
Well,
What kind of air am I sticking into the carburetor?
Hot air.
Hot air. Any problems with that?
not enough.
Huge.
How about detonation?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, start adding a bunch of hot air in there, so something else to think about. Let's see, what have I got right here? Carb heat. Carb heat is unfiltered.
Is that 100 degrees average then?
What's that?
Is that 100 degrees Fahrenheit average?
The carb heat adding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was enough to make it detonate?
Maybe I shouldn't say detonation. Well, some people say detonation. I just don't know about that. I know if you get the air hot enough in the intake manifold, it'll light off in the intake manifold, and that's not a good thing.
So you're gonna front fire?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem with turbocharging. You can get it too hot, it'll light off the air. But
The air will light off with
huh?
the
The
air
fuel
will
air
light-
mixture.
Oh.
Yeah. But I have read some books that say it's a detonation issue. I have to think about why. You're going lean. No, you're going rich.
Zero average.
Going rich. I'll think about that one some more. Anyway, but that's your carb heat. So carb heat, remember, you can't. So your pilot comes to you and says, "I got a terrible problem with my airplane." What's wrong with your airplane? Well, you know, I'm supposed to check my carb heat before I take off, and every time I'm sitting there, I run my engine up to about 1,700 RPM, and I pull on the carb heat, and I always lose about 150 to 200 RPM. Something's wrong with my engine. That's normal. No, that's not what you say. That sounds serious. It's going to be expensive.
That depends if you own the shop.
I know. You know, you have to leave this here with me. So, yeah. All right. So it's supposed to do that.
Or free flying.
All right. Repairs. See if we can condense some of this. Well, maybe not. You never know. What I leave out is probably as important. Always use manufacturer. Maintenance manual. Well, I'm going to write what I wrote here. Then I'll talk about why it's controversial. Latest overhaul / repair manual. If you work for a repair station, you're always going to be looking for the absolute latest, most up-to-date repair manual that is possible. And if you don't have it, you're likely going to get in some trouble. But believe it or not, and I had to do somebody brought this up to me, and I thought, man, is that true? And I did a lot of research on it and actually found out that this is true. So if you have a 1947 Cessna 140 and you got a manual with the airplane the day it came out of the shop, and they said, well, here's the manual for it, boom. Here we are in 2019, and Cessna, let's say they've updated that manual every year since then. What's the latest manual?
2019.
Okay, today's. Which manual do you have to have?
Original.
Latest.
The one that was put in the airplane when it rolled out of the factory is considered the current, not current, what's the word they use? It is considered, I think, a current manual. And I actually have some letters from FAA officials that I've saved in my computer. I couldn't believe it. But that was the actual statement, was if it's the manual that the airplane had when it rolled out of the factory, as long as it was current on that day, that is an acceptable manual, and you do not need the revisions thereafter.
But you need the service bulletins and instructions and all that stuff.
Not necessarily, and that gets into a whole nother lecture, but a manufacturer can't make you do something. So technically speaking, manufacturers' service bulletins, letters, and instructions are completely optional. Now, I would say the exception to that is Lycoming, who puts it in the front of the book that says, those are part of our manual. Now, this is all stuff lawyers can argue about. What am I going to do? I want the absolute latest, most current, up-to-date manual possible, because nobody can fault you for that. And I want all service bulletins, letters, instructions, because it's important information. So that's, the standard I shoot for. But as long as you have, now that you know, the more you know. All right. If you're a repair station, though, you're going to always want this stuff. Always have current service bulletins, service letters, service instructions. And you guys saw with Lycoming why that's so critical. There's so much more information in these service bulletins, letters, and instructions. Well, service bulletins and letters. Service bulletins and instructions. Letters, not so much. But you can see how much you're missing, and people's lives are in stakes. Let's see.
Those manuals, you have to contact the manufacturer to get the latest.
Oh, they're expensive. They're very expensive.
If you have a business, you constantly be chasing after those things.
Yep. And nowadays with computers, it's a lot easier because you can call a company like ATP and say, hey, I need the Cessna library. They'll say, no problem. We get the Cessna library, and it'll be up to date, guaranteed, online access. It'll just be $5,000 a month. What about Beach? We need that too. So yeah, I don't know the exact price, but it depends on the manufacturer and how much data there is. It's very, very expensive. Let me think here. You guys use drill bits for measuring the orifices in your. All right. So if I'm going to do that, manual says to use the number 40 drill bit. What do I need to do?
You need a standard, right?
Can you just grab a drill bit out of the index?
No.
What do you have to do?
It has to be calibrated.
You got to calibrate that drill bit. How are you going to calibrate that drill bit?
Run it through a calibrated hole.
There's an easier way.
Like a calibrated.
Okay, you're going to run through a calibrated hole.
How's that hole?
How do you know that hole's calibrated? How was the last time that was calibrated?
I got it from the magic box.
As long as it was calibrated reasonably. So, let me see. I'll just use tools. It's fine to use a drill bit. First of all, don't use the drilly part. If you push hard enough and twist hard enough, every drill bit worked. You turn it around. So how do you calibrate it?
By the shank.
Use a micrometer.
Use a micrometer. How often should the micrometer be checked? It depends on what your repair station says, but every year is an acceptable practice. Use tools that have been calibrated. And you kind of take this for granted until you start thinking about every little thing you do. So who's done the marbles so far on the carb bench? All right. So then you're supposed to do it to how many PSI? Okay, I'll take 6. Half and 6.
0.5.
Was that a calibrated gauge? No, it wasn't. So that had to be calibrated, huh? What'd you do when you put it on the test stand?
Placed in the pressure on it.
How'd you mount it? You level it? Yeah? Was that level calibrated?
James said there was whiskey in it.
There was, I would have tried it.
That's why it wasn't filled all the way up.
Yeah, that's why there's a little bit missing, because it was whiskey. No, I'm just saying, you got to think about this. Every time you do something, every little gauge, every little thing you do, it's like, was that calibrated? Was that calibrated? Didn't I tell you my story about the magneto test stand?
No.
No, you're just saying that so I get off. So, you probably could tell this story better than I can at this point. Right, so I was the chief inspector and then the general manager for a repair station. So, it was welcome. The FAA was always welcome in my shop. That was just a standing rule. We really liked the FAA. We liked it, and no, we really did. Had a great relationship with the FAA. They encouraged us to become a repair station, and then which is a long process. Then when they were always there and willing to help. And if you get to know the FAA and you're on their good side, they are really a great bunch of people. They're just like us, gearhead kind of people, and they have great sense of humor. Still my favorite joke. They come in like, oh no, the FAA's here, and that's when hey Kevin, did we tell you the FAA's new slogan? Our new slogan? No, what's that? We're not happy until you're not happy. So that's their joke. But anyway, so they go, and they come and do their thing, and just kind of give us a bad time. And want to check stuff and just make sure you're thinking. And so they walked into the mag shop, and my guy's doing a magneto, and he put it on the magneto test stand. And you guys most know what that is. So you put it on the magneto test stand, you hook the wires up, and then you run it, and it has to fire all of them at a certain RPM. And that's called coming in speed. So coming in speed has to be a minimum of 150. So at 150 RPM, you have to spark all stuff consistently. So they're watching that. That's pretty cool. Is it working? Yeah. Nice. So you got a little RPM gauge there. When was the last time you calibrated the RPM gauge? Don't see an RPM sticker on there. What else do I have to calibrate? The little gap that it's jumping. When was the last time you calibrated that? Well, we did calibrate the little jump, just last week. Well, how'd you do that? Well, we used some drill bits that says the right size. We used the end of the drill bit and we measured the gap. How did you know the drill bits were accurate? Because we used this micrometer over here. How do you know the micrometer is accurate? Because we had it calibrated. There's a little sticker on it, and here's a standard that we use to check it that has a sticker on it, and we do that every year. Awesome. Now tell me about this RPM gauge. I'm glad you asked, because it wasn't that long before they got there. I thought the same thing. Hey, how do we know that RPM gauge is accurate? Well, I'm glad I asked myself that. And so the guy I was working with, Steve, and I thought, how can we figure this out? Well, they had just come out with these things called optical handheld tach checkers. And because I had heard at some seminar that all these the RPM gauges, tachometers, are notoriously inaccurate. And so you hold this little thing up, and it has a button that says 2-blade or 3-blade, and it just counts the flashes of the propeller going by. And it's a very good digital readout. So we figured out a way to put something on our little mag thing that was going around in circles. Well, I think we used a little we tried lights and stuff, had to use a battery one, and we figured it all out, and we made it work, and we got it all calibrated, and we had a calibration chart, and it was really sweet. Like, hey, that's really cool. And how'd you do that again? We show them the whole thing, goes, handheld tach checker, huh? When was the last time you calibrated that? I'm glad you asked, because right here in the instructions it says, to calibrate your handheld tach checker, simply hold it up to a fluorescent light. And based upon the hertz that that's giving, it will give you a specific readout. Sweet. What do you think they asked next?
this is what you get.
how do you know that is? And I said, come on, man. I said, Divisions of Weight and Measures has to monitor SMUD. And he laughed. He goes, I know, just see what you'd say. But that's the way it is, you know. Dig deeper, deeper, deeper. So used tools have been calibrated. Okay, so I told you about the drill bit, so make sure what else we got here? I've got a bunch of stuff here. So you guys will check the Marvel Shebler with the drill bit and the same thing. So and measuring fuel levels, do not measure near the edge. Why not? Meniscus. Bless you. Yes, because the fuel doesn't follow. It's not perfectly level. It kind of, at a microscopic, it crawls up at the edges. So surface tension is exactly it. Well, we should probably write this. Do not use shop air. What did I write? To test floats. Well, why not? A, B, C, D. Because they get really flat. Remember my story?
Unless you saw the blue epoxy style.
Yeah, unless it's blue, then you just add all the shop air you want. All right, so, and I told you that story about how I mentioned in passing to do the shop air thing. And so here's a great lesson. And I told you that what happens is people tend to do things when they're not fully engaged. So if you are engaged in a project, that's one thing, and you can make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, right? And if you make a mistake here, I'm here just to make fun of you because it makes me feel better about all the mistakes I made, right? So that's the whole point. So a mistake was made yesterday, and nobody in this class noticed it, including me.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No one there?
Huh? Yeah, I'm gonna go there. So after we ran that engine yesterday, and we all watched it run, and we were putting it away, Josh comes up to me and says, you know, somebody in second year mentioned that we put the air shroud on backwards.
It was on top instead of below.
No, it was on top.
No.
Close.
So you're supposed to have the scooping air up towards the propeller. It was this way. So that we had blocked off the front.
To be fair, that was just for running last night because we had it on the right way earlier and took it off to do the compression until James told us to put it up.
Oh, okay.
And then we put it back on because we knew we were gonna run it.
But still,
It was dark.
it's it was. If I would have said, you know,
Everyone was looking at the flame coming out of the exhaust.
I know.
It was the
and I'm really not pointing at you guys. I'm pointing more this way and showing you just how easy it is when you're not fully engaged in something to actually notice that. You just kind of take some things for granted. It's right in front of you, like, we'd be dumb enough to do that, you know? But they fixed it.
That'd be Brett's group.
That would be Brett's group, wouldn't that? Today, that's Brett's group. No, that's not. I don't know. I'm serious. I'm not pointing fingers at you guys. It's really all about us. We all stood there, not one of us noticed. The last person who should have noticed actually would have been Brett because he was standing behind it running the engine, and the other guy too, whoever that was who was running the engine.
Blocking the airflow for the oil drip.
It did help. All right. Do not use shop air to test floats. Any leakage, or any air leakage will be worse at full throttle or idle.
Idle.
Why? Because
Because you have ambient on the towards the venturi, and you have a severe vacuum on the other side of the throttle plate.
Okay, so at idle, you have more of a vacuum inside of the manifold, which means it's going to work harder to draw any air in. So any minor imperfection is amplified, and there's not a lot of air going through the carburetor to begin with. So everything you add to it is proportionally more. And then once you go to full throttle, the intake manifold is closer to ambient, so it's not working as hard to pull in any outside air. And if it did, it's really proportionally, it's not as much. So it'd be worse at idle. So if something doesn't idle, you can usually suspect intake leak. Installation. Use new gaskets. Use caution, as most carb gaskets. This is the gasket between the carburetor and the intake manifold. Have the same bolt pattern. Oops, bolt pattern. But different, we see cutout diameters. What I mean by that is that with the throttle body, yeah, that makes a gasket. We'll pretend like this is a gasket. These 4 holes, most carburetors are about the same. There's only a few variations, and sometimes they'll make, like this gasket would go on, and it's not blocking the throttle. Some of them, the hole is much smaller, and so you decrease this opening. And in NASCAR, they call that a restrictor plate. Who's a NASCAR fan in here? As I look, I can see that you would enjoy shiny things going in a circle for hours. Sorry, that's my wife's joke when I watch NASCAR. So you're gonna sit on the couch and watch shiny things go in a circle all day? Is that what you're gonna do? Yeah. Okay.
I also watch Roman ice skate with sticks.
So
No one cares.
let me see. Wrong gasket. Wrong gasket can cause a restriction. Right, so NASCAR, they use restrictor plates, right? The cars are going too fast, and so what they did is, in a sense, they put a metal plate between the carburetor. I don't know if they use carburetors or fuel injection. I don't know what they
Still
use.
use carburetors.
Carburetors, okay, so they use a plate that actually makes this hole smaller so that they get less fuel and go slower. Am I right about that? Okay. Set your controls properly. What do I mean by that? Linkage is right. Forward is forward. The stop at the component should always hit before the control. It's like I was saying, you have a control in the cockpit. When I go all the way forward, I should hit in the carburetor before I hit inside the aircraft. And that's something I do on every aircraft, every inspection, every annual. Even my own, which I checked last year, I'm going to check it again this year. It takes 2 people. I'm going to say, okay, I like to put the junior person in the front, and I'll say, okay, throttle all the way forward. And I sit there and I watch it go all the way forward, and I watch how anything's flexing, anything's not working quite right, and I make sure it hits the stop. at the full stop throttle, and then I'll stop, and then I'll walk around and get inside, and I'll look and make sure that it's obvious that it hit out there in the engine control first. Then I'll walk back around, say, okay, go to idle, and pull it back to idle, and I'll watch that work, and then I'll say, okay, do it a couple more times. I'll spray a little LPS1 on or something, clean, get it all nice and clean. I'll do that for every single thing in the engine compartment. Let's see. Stop. 1/8 to 1/4 inch cushion. You can have more. All right, troubleshooting. And we could stop there for a break, huh?